Uh, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 3 in the 29th International Conference of Management of Technology. Today, we will have a very interesting session about the IAMOT 2020 Editors Panel. And we are really delighted to have a very distinguished list of panelists with us today. So I will leave the microphone to the session chair, Dr. Breno. He's the Vice President for Education in the IAMOT board. So Breno, would you please open the camera and microphone, and all our distinguished panelists. We are welcoming here as well Dr. Tariq Khalil, President of the conference and the founder of IAMOT. Breno, microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Nisa. Welcome everybody for this session in the IAMOT 2020. I will share my screen here with you, and I hope you can see my slides. You just confirm, Nisa, that you all can see my slides.
Yes.
So excellent. Well, thanks, Nisa, and I think thanks to all editors who accepted our invitation to participate in the 2020 Editors Panel. It's a great pleasure to have you all here. It's very important for our members to hear from you, and for us as the International Association for Management of Technology to build up a relationship with journals, key journals, important journals in our area. I also would like to thank Professor Tugrul Daim, who accepted to participate in this session, but unfortunately, given the situation in Oregon, the wildfires in the US, he is unable to join us today, but will be represented by Professor Steve Walsh. So also, kindly thanks to Steve for representing IEEE here. Two things here from me. Just see if the slides are going through. On the format of the session, I will do this quick introduction here, and then we're going to move on to a short presentation from each editor, and after that we're going to have questions and discussions that we'll go through, including topics, the items that I have already put here on the screen, such as like how to convert your or to develop your conference papers into journal articles. What are the emerging topics or subjects that are in the interest of the editors that researchers should be preparing the future research to include in the agenda of future research. Some pitfalls for authors to avoid, and how to maximize citations. So these are one of the key things that we're going to be discussing, but also, of course, we're going to open for the audience to have their own questions. And I would like to request you all to do that by using the Q&A session in your screen. So do not put your questions in the chat box, but do use the Q&A. And if you do have a question to a specific editor, please do state in your question that you would like a particular editor to answer that question. Without further ado, let me present our speakers today. We have Professor Scott Cunningham from University of Strathclyde. He is Associate Editor of Technological Forecasting and Social Change. Professor Steve Walsh, Senior Editor of the Journal of Small Business Management. Is full Professor of Management and Technology and Entrepreneurship, University of New Mexico. He will also be representing IAAA Transaction Engineering Management. Professor Harmyon Istinius is Professor of Management International Business in Hawaii Pacific University, where he is also Associate Dean. And he is Editor-in-Chief of two journals, the International Journal of Information and Operations Management Education, and the Journal of Manufacturing Technology Management. Dr. Gerten van der Kaar, Associate Professor of Standardization and Business Strategy at Delft University Technology in the Netherlands. and he is guest editor of two journals, of the International Journal of Standardization Research and Energies Journal. Professor James Flack, emeritus professor at the University of Edinburgh, in the Institute for Study of Science, Technology and Innovation, and he is the editor-in-chief of the Technology Analysis and Strategic Management Journal. And last but not least, just across the corner here in Birmingham as well, Birmingham, UK, Professor Dave Bailey, at the University of Birmingham in the Birmingham Business School, editor-in-chief of the Regional Studies Journal. So without further ado, shall we now hand over to Professor Scott Cunningham from the Technological Forecasting and Social Change Journal. I'll stop sharing my screen, and Scott, it's over to you now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I am indeed an associate editor of Technological Forecasting and Social Change. I also want to mention that Steve Walsh is also one of our editors, but he's representing other journals today. So I'm going to give you a very short presentation focusing on the scope, examples of our content, let you know a little bit about our metrics, a little bit about our process, and then I'm going to close with some issues that I hope you'll pick up in the questions according to your interest. So our journal is about technological forecasting. So we're very interested in not just the technology, but also the interrelationships between social and environmental factors as well in the content. So we've recently celebrated our 50th anniversary. The journal was founded in 1969 by Hal Lindstone. He's famous for our work in Delphi analysis and judgmental forecasting, and he was our editor-in-chief for most of that time until about 2010. Our current editor-in-chief is Fred Phillips, who couldn't be here today, but sends his greetings. And we have a very extensive editorial board and many associate editors, 20 of us. Part of the reason we do that is just to help manage the big flow of papers. So I think we have about 2,000 submissions a year and about 400 or 500 papers in review at any given time, including all of the special issues that we have. So here's a few metrics about us. The site score of 8.7, I think that's a 4-year running average of citations per paper. Impact factor is a big, often used measure. That's 5.8. And another metric that may be of interest to you is the Google Scholar metric, which places us at 14th in the field of business economics and management. Here's some example content word clouds. I love word clouds. Here's maybe 7 big areas that we focus on. I would say that almost everything in the paper, in the journal, contains some of these keywords from the top about scenarios, futures, forecasts, and decision making. But of course, there's a big component about innovation or technology. And very much interested in transitions and change. So there at the bottom left, you can see focus on energy and transitions and economic modeling. Very interested in networks, networks between firms, networks in patents. So we have an overlapping portfolio with other journals with some of these core interests. Just to pick one example article, I just chose one of our top cited articles of the last 10 years so you could get an idea of the articles that are really well received by our audience, by those that want to read and review. Is this article by Reina and Strykova? There's no particular reason why I chose this one, but it's a very interesting article, I think. From rapid prototyping to home fabrication, how 3D printing is changing business model innovations. So that's about 4 years old, but it's now really widely cited in its field. I think you can see why. It's a hot topic, interfacing technology and economics. So yeah, I'm glad to share that article with you. So let me give you a little bit about the time and acceptance figures for us. So as I say, I think we have more than about 2,000 submissions a year with 400 in review. I guess I I guess our acceptance rate is about 14%, or this is what Elsevier says. We don't strive to reject papers, but it's really a practical process of how we're going to manage so many reviewers, how we're going to manage so many papers, help them through the process and assign them to reviewers. Means that our editor-in-chief really has to do a lot of desk rejection here. He needs to pick the papers that are really going to have a good shot of making it through the process, given the fact that the community of reviewers aren't so big. But if you get past the desk reviewer, then I'm thinking it's about half of those again are going to be accepted, and half of those again are going to be able to be rejected. There's probably a couple, there might be one or two or more rounds at that point. And here are some figures about time to first decision. This is according to Elsevier, but also according to other people that comment on the journal. Say it's about 13 to 16 weeks into first decision, and a total handling time of 23 to 26 weeks. I would point out that these are very skewed numbers, because if many of the articles are being desk rejected, then the handling time at least is very rapid there. It's disappointing to be desk rejected, but you have a clear answer about where to take the paper next. So I think averages are really not so useful as distributions, and I wish I had a better distribution here to share with you. So with that, I'm just going to conclude with some issues and insights, and I hope that we can have a better talk about with the audience. First one is I'd like to let you know that the journal is single-blinded. That means the reviewers will see you, but you won't know your reviewers. That's just a tradition in the journal. I don't hear many comments about it anymore, but a few reviewers are a little bit alarmed by that, the fact that we adopt this single-blinded process. I'd speculate that we do that to enable, to fully consider the author's background and therefore their credibility when talking about particular issues of science and technology, but I couldn't tell you about that for certain. As I say, it's a tradition. Another thing that I wish I knew as an author is how scarce reviewers are. I mean, authors are extremely important. They're the lifeblood of the paper, the journal, but it's hard to get reviewers. People really chip in, but I'm routinely asking 6 reviewers to get 2, maybe even 9 to get 2. Life is busy, and people don't have a lot of time to invest in reviews. And some of my advice as authors is make it very easy for a reviewer. There's a language of signaling that points out what your contributions are. Make the whole article clean, but certainly get your abstract and your titles clear and compelling. Another issue is about self-plagiarism that we've been talking about in the editorial board. So plagiarism itself is easily addressed, not easily addressed, but it's addressed through electronic means. I mean, there's a big database of articles out there, so if your article is plagiarized, that's going to come immediately. It's a lot more subtle about self-plagiarism. So that said, this means reusing your work in a way that's beyond standard ethics. We do welcome conference papers. You have to establish that you have the right to republish that work, but we welcome it. We recognize that conferences are a place for you to get your ideas out, to receive feedback on, and then incorporate them in. So we would like you to use the benefit of your conference reviews and your conference presentations to make an even better paper. A final point is there's a lot of discussion amongst associate editors and I about significance of a contribution. So when it comes to picking which papers are going to be prioritized, which are going to be sent out to reviewers as a scarce resource, the real key is about significance. And I think that I've been thinking about this word lately. If one person thinks the work is important and the other one doesn't, why is that? I think, again, it's a matter of telegraphing your work, using the key words or key phrases that will readily communicate what the importance and the contributions of the work is. I don't think it's a single platonic quality of significance. I think it's a way of how you frame your work and how you describe the significance of it to others. So I look forward to hearing the rest of the presentations and discussing with you as an audience later. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott, for your presentation. According to our agenda now, we're moving to Professor Stephen Walsh. Scott, if you could stop sharing your screen, then Steve can share his.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Tarek for putting on this conference. I got to tell you, it's the first conference I ever went to. I don't feel more at home than any other place. I want to thank Brino for what he's doing. Scott, I want to thank you for putting my name up there too. And Haiti for actually getting me on. So I appreciate all you folks and I thank you. I would like to say one thing about TFSC. It is also in the top 10 journals in technology entrepreneurship in the world. And it's a place where I have passion and I publish there a lot. So thank you, Scott, for that great presentation. And I'll try to do the best I can, but being up after you is always a challenge. All right. So I am speaking about two journals. The Journal of Small Business Management, at one time, the #1 journal for small business entrepreneurship in the world. And in the early days of IAMOT would come. And then they seemed to go away. And then two editors, they have just had an editor change. Eric Lingori is now the editor of Journal of Small Business Management. It used to be George Solomon. And George wanted to get back to our community and asked me if I would go on and be an associate editor to do that. And so here they are. I will also say that JSBM is doing a joint special issue with TFSC, and we should have that out sometime in the next month, and would love to have you do this. This is different for journals. About 5 years ago, I did that with JSBM with another journal. And this year we're doing it, I am on the TFSC team. I am not on the JSBM team on that one. But anyway, I feel wonderful that they think well enough for me to do this. So let me go ahead. Just to give you an issue here, the impact factor of this journal is 3.12. It used to be on the Financial Times list. It is no longer. It's a good journal. It is probably the best small business journal in the world. It's a very good entrepreneurship journal. It again ranks in the top 15 on technology entrepreneurship. Just to give you some idea of the journal, it's been getting better, as most journals have, and it's doing quite well. It's now, as I said, impact factor 3.12. And I want to say, shout out to Scott. What a great job that I think we all have done with TFSC. 5.8 is an exceptional impact rate. And you can all this community can take pride in that because they often publish authors from IAMOT. There's over 40 associate editors here. I'm technology entrepreneurship kind of editor there. And they're really trying to reach out to our community to see if we would like to do this. Again, Eric Lingori from Rowan University is the editor-in-chief. I happen to have an associate editor in my school, UNM, where I'm a professor. I'm also a professor. I see we have a lot of people from the Netherlands. I'm also a professor at University of Groningen in their entrepreneurship group. Just take a look at article downloads. This is the last one I had from these folks. You can see that they're all over the place, which is good. United Kingdom, United States, a lot of folks in the Netherlands. Everybody is downloading these folks. I try to put up their best journals that their top cited articles in 2016. I will tell you that their number of days to publishing, just like TFSC, I don't think it's because of me, but since I've become there and since Scott and I have been at TFSC, it's gone down. And we all know that. I will tell you that I'm not as nice as Scott. If you don't review, I'm not very happy to see a paper from you. And Scott's very much nicer than me. I imagine Harm is as well. But if you don't review and you don't review twice, say twice, no, I'm too busy. Well, I'm often too busy to review your paper. So, and that's just something I do. And maybe we can talk about that later. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking here about Eric. I'm also going to talk at the end about IJTIP. I'm doing 2 journals. I'm trying to go fast. So that's all I did for that journal. I want to thank Tugral for thinking well enough of me to represent IEEE, where I'm also on the Associate Editors Board. I'm an Associate Editor for Breakthrough Technologies for IEEE. This is what he looks like before the fire. This is what he looks like now. So this is an actual fire at Picmet outside of Portland and near his home. So I want to show you that he's sweating. And anybody that talks to Tugral, you can tell him I probably had a joke on him, and hopefully it's okay. Yeah, but that's my Native American part of me. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not true an American. I'm part Native American, part East Indian, part English, part Scottish, part Irish. So there where he's sweating it out. But I'd like to show you a little bit. This is a journal that is also association journal, as JSBM is. JSBM is ICSB, International Conference of Small Businesses Journal. This IEEE is engineering, it's the IEEE journal, the transactions on, or their TIMS group. It's been an exceptional journal for our field for an awful long time. They don't just publish from their folks. And I just tried to give you a look at one of their special issues. Their special issue is unveiling the digital transformation of organizations across multiple levels of analysis. I just picked one. They didn't have a really good picture of their journal like JSBM, so I picked the what their TEM is, their journal logo. I love this. I couldn't get better out of this, and because this is 2020 and we're still in 2020, and it talks about transaction engineering management by month. And I go, well, how could we possibly already have 5 acceptances in September, October, November, and December, because we're not there yet. But these are articles that are set to go in the journal, as I was told. And cumulative, this gives you the number of articles that they have accepted, which I think is important to know. I tried to take a look at where they're getting their material from, high on the United States, some general information. They're really looking for people from other areas to do it. I know Tarek's been involved in the past with this. We all have been involved in one way or another. I guess I should say the Tugral's an IEEE fellow. I'm trying to be a good boy here. So he's the editor-in-chief. Everybody's got to know the impact factor. Many schools look at an A impact factor as anything over 2.0 in the United States and in other places in the world. This is one of those journals. Both of these journals, one's 3.2, of course, TFSC is now the highest rated journal in our field, I believe. And well, maybe research policy, I don't know. Anyway, Tugral is the folks, and we have people, Elias Karianis, another guy from my school. I like to say to all the Dutch people out there that I went to the best Dutch engineering school in the world. I went to Rensselaer Of course, it's in New York, and I know Scott will get a kick out of that, and perhaps our other Dutch colleague. But I always wear those medals, that thing when I go. I have PhD privileges, first at the University of Twente, where Harms was from, and now at Groningen. So you can see the kind of fields they're doing. I just put down mine. I'm on emerging technologies in this group. I'm on technology entrepreneurship. On others, I do a lot of economic development in TFSC. These, you can really see the people. And one of the things I would urge you to do, except if it's me, if you're going to put an article into a journal and you have an associate editor in a field there, you should really take a look at that field and what that person has done in it. And also, if you send in a journal, and this goes to both of these fields, I routinely, that's 4:30 in the morning, Tarek, I'm sorry. I routinely reject journals, papers that I don't care if they cite TFSC or JSBM or IEEE, but if you don't cite the field, you're not speaking to the field. And I routinely desk reject your paper. I've been asked to do more desk rejects. I've got to tell you, we really try to work with everybody in all of these journals. If you have a thing or wherever, we have a thing now with a couple of the journals, this being one, TFSC being another, where if I think your journal paper is interesting, however, you can't handle English in your abstract, you can't handle English in your first two paragraphs, I often give the talk at this journal about how to publish, but noun, verb, noun in English. I know it's not ablative absolute as it is in Dutch and in German, and in Mandarin, which I can speak just a little bit of, but noun, verb, noun, and keep your sentences less than 20 would be great. And, aims and scopes, research, development, engineering, industry, other settings. Whoops. And I guess I've been asked to talk about IJTIP. Is that true, Brino?
Yes, you're fine with time, you know.
Okay, I went fast. I did
Yep.
my funny, but I have two to cover. So the IJTIP is partnered with IAMOT to do a special issue out of the conference. They're an up-and-coming journal. Nazrul Islam, who is an associate editor on some of the other journals, including TFSC, might be the guy to talk to. I know he's talking with the board, which I had of IAMOT, which I had the pleasure of working on for about 15 years before they got smart and kicked me off. So I hope that works out for you and works out for them. It's the International Journal of Technology, Intelligence, and Planning. It's a nice journal, and I hope you work out well with them. Good folks. All of the journals here are great. If you get an article in any of them, God bless you. You've done a great job, and I hope I did a good enough job at showing the fire and how two girls sweating, and representing Eric and the upcoming special issue with TFSC. So I thank you, and I will shut up.
Thanks, Steve. I think we all here hope that too grows as well and safe. And we shall move on. But before we do that, let me just highlight, Steve mentioned a special issue, and then that's the kind of values and ethos that IAMOT holds as an association. We want to be very inclusive in terms of giving opportunities to people to publish. And we are building up a relationship, not just with the journals that are presenting today in the editors panel, but we we are expanding our relationship in order to accommodate the interest of our IAMOT members in terms of the stage of their careers. For instance, I mean, you can see top journals here, but also you're gonna see that we have what we call like entry-level journals, if you wish, you know, that are very important for PhD students or for early career researchers, as well as IAMOT is a global association. And it is in our interest that we are not limited by one country's ranking. So we're looking at various rankings, we're looking at various quality parameters to build up relationship with journals. So it's we ought to respect the geographical differences, the different national rankings for research that our members belong to. Okay, so we felt any more issues. Let's move on to our next speaker, Professor James Flack, Editor-in-Chief of Technology Analysis and Strategic Management, Professor at the University of Edinburgh. James, over to you.
So, hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. While I wrestle with getting this up and running, I've got a few slides here. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good. Well, it's always difficult to follow when illustrious colleagues have taken the high ground and laid out many of the issues. But let me introduce technology analysis and strategic management. If I can get the system to work. So TASM has been in existence for 32 years. In fact, I'm delighted that Harry Rothman, the founding editor of TASM, was in fact one of my master's teachers. So it was a real privilege to take over from him, and I've enjoyed many conversations with him about the nature of the journal. The journal focuses on innovation and technology development in the strategic context, in the business context. And it ranges on a full range of issues, from management issues to policy issues to industrial applications. It ranges from very local, regional to national and to international patterns and policies. So it really covers the whole field. It's very broad in its approach. And I think that's perhaps the distinctiveness of TASM, that it is very broad in its scope. It's very interdisciplinary. In fact, as a rule of thumb for a desk reject, I will not be happy to see very specific disciplinary bounded submissions. I think there are many journals that are better suited to publishing those sorts of articles. We are interested in articles that cover, that bring in perspectives across different disciplines, as I think technology development and innovation both demand. It's a subscription journal. It's indexed. It's usually acquired by libraries as part of a package. But nowadays, there are a number of open access arrangements are available, and they're becoming, I think, more common and more popular. In terms of metrics, we've got an impact factor of 1.739. I don't think that's bad considering its strong interdisciplinary nature. What I have noticed is that different countries clearly rate the journal in different ways. So we're very highly rated in Italy, for instance. So we have a lot of respect. We have increasing numbers of submissions from China, Taiwan, and Korea, and from the Middle East, and from Latin America. In fact, I think now the number of submissions from the UK is actually a small proportion of the total. So it's very essentially international. And that actually benefits the focus on national and international patterns of innovation and technology development. In terms of Google metrics, we are also in the top 20. I think we're number 18. In terms of specifically innovation entrepreneurship journals, I think there's about 6 or 7 there. But one point I'd make here, and it's a point that David Sweeney, who's now head of the English Research Institute, was head of the UK Research Institute, he used to go apoplectic at the way that management in particular, the management arena, focused on journal metrics. And he kept on saying, for goodness sake, it's the quality of the individual article that matters, not the journal. And their analysis showed that high quality articles could be found in low status journals, and high status journals often hosted rather poor articles. So I would emphasize that to would-be authors, that it's the quality of the article that you need to focus on, not be too misled by the journal's position. We're open to non-conventional approaches. Indeed, I'd like to see more of those. I think actually in distinction to what Steve was saying, I'm always interested in strange articles that do not necessarily fit within the received wisdom of a particular community, but actually maybe have an insight that might disturb the complacent, this we know what we know type of thing. And one recent one was a long-term history analysis of small arms weapons as a long case study of technology development. I thought it was a fascinating article, but by Jove, I had real difficulties getting reviewers for that, because so many people were focused on, oh, this doesn't cite the literature that I know. That's a pity. I think we could do with a broader, more wider taking in different perspectives there. Special issues have been important in the past. I've got several worries about that. I don't know how my colleagues have found this, but thanks to the lockdown, my workload has doubled. We are having twice as many articles submitted this year than previously. Now, I don't know if that's a reflection of just the journal. My suspicion is that academics, because they're meeting through Zoom, they don't spend as much time in meetings or in bureaucracy at the universities. They've got more time to finish off those papers. And so they're then thinking, where can we submit them? So that really emphasizes what my colleagues have both mentioned as well. Reviewers are a scarce resource. By Jove, they're a scarce resource. I think Scott was saying routinely 6 or 8 reviewers. I did an analysis of how many I have to approach, and I found that the tail is the first people I approach will review, but also I'm up to several papers where I've up to 20 reviewers and still finding difficulty in getting reviews. The majority are around about 6 to 8 actually. So, but that means that has a knock-on effect on the time to publish. And so I would say, yes, for an immediate test reject, I aim at less than a month. For a review, it's up to 3 months, really. It can be as little as a month. And for the complete process, it's 6 months to a year. Very much, I think, the same as the figures that Scott was given. I mentioned that special issues have been important, and here are some of the topics going back. You can see it's quite a wide range. Matchmaking for open innovation, way back in 2014. That was a special issue that came out of a conference, in fact. Smart metering in society, that was a very more specific one that highlighted many of the problems experienced in the UK. It was based on European Journal project, and they had a workshop that led to that. You can see here with government and the bioeconomy that's coming through, biosimilars, and we've got various other proposals on biological innovation, which is, I think, showing that we're looking at innovation across the boundaries of different technologies. One's forthcoming, quantum innovation and technology management. There's a call for papers out for that. An interesting one, DIY science. It's one of those unconventional approaches, I think, is of increasing importance. I don't know whether many of you have been following some of the initiatives that have been taken in COVID. There's an initiative that's now got, what, 3 million people signing on each day, reporting how whether they're healthy or not, or whether they've been for a COVID test. I think that's quite an interesting approach, and it's citizen science. It's taking a different approach to real-time analysis of what the challenges might be facing technology.
James, 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to finish up with, well, a comment here also is that Taylor and Francis do publish, to access a different audience, books out of the some of the special issues. And that means that they're targeting individuals rather than the institutional market. Top 10 tips to get published. Let me just rehearse a few of these. Think the significance one, have something worth saying, not just another run-of-the-mill churning out a paper because you require a paper for career purpose. Is it actually worth publishing? I think that if everyone considered more carefully the value of the papers, it might be a lot less work for us as journals to do. Other issues, a clear focus, check the fit with the journal. What does the journal actually favor? What are previous papers? What are the editors interested in? Look at the journal requirements to make the reviewing process easy. My favorite issue here is keywords. If the keywords that are proposed by the journal are used, it makes life so much easier in identifying appropriate reviewers. English language editing was also mentioned by my colleagues. That is an issue. It's an issue even for Brits. It's not just for overseas non-native speakers. Know the field. Go back to old references. Don't just get caught up in thinking that what was cited from last year is all that is in the field, especially in the field of innovation and technology management. I think we're now becoming a mature field, and actually there's some papers, some books from 40, 50 years ago. Management of Innovation, Burns and Stalker, I think, is an evergreen. One of my key issues here is that this links up to the having something worth saying, that if the paper is actually hitting topics that are worthwhile, then the methodology merely becomes a means to the end. I get quite frustrated at papers that seem to think that methodology is all that matters, and they don't really, very sophisticated methodology, but they don't really say anything worthwhile. That's quite frustrating. Reviewers are a scarce resource. So as a submitting author, do regard what they say carefully. They are a sample of the population for your paper, and respond politely. We do follow a double blind, so that often leads to more blunt comments, I think, being offered on both sides. And one way I would suggest for authors, really reflecting Steve's comment, if people aren't reviewing, why should they expect to be published? A good way to understand the whole process is, in fact, to act, to volunteer as a reviewer, so that you can see the whole process and actually contribute to the field. And finally, have patience. We do depend on the goodwill of reviewers. It does take time, and I think my colleagues have stressed that perhaps is increasing. So patience, I think, is a demand on the part of authors who are submitting. And that's, if people want a bit more information, I'm hoping that some interesting papers might come out from IAMOT. I look forward to seeing those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor James Flack. Shall we move now to Dr. Gerten van der Kar? James, if you could stop sharing your screen, please. Then we can move on to Gerten. Gerten will be talking about 2 journals. Again, just 7 minutes, Gerten, please, so we can keep up with time.
Do you see this, Breno? This presentation?
Yes, I can see it. We can hear you well, so.
Good. So thank you. Thank you first, Breno, for inviting me to the panel. So I'm going to say something about the International Journal of Standardization Research. And I noticed that we are almost at the end of the first part, so I try to do it as quickly as possible. Well, the first issue of this journal was actually in 1999, so it's quite a young journal, I think, compared to the other journals. At that time, it was called the International Journal of IT Standards and Standardization Research, and we changed it to International Journal of Standardization Research in 2015, and it's published semi-annually. It's published by IGI. The objective of the journal is to publish the latest research related to standards and standardization, but it's not about technical specifications. So if you're more interested in that, then I would suggest you to go to other journals, more technical journals. We are more interested in standardization in organizations, basically meaning that the company standardization, but also standardization in formal standardization organizations such as IEEE or ITU, but also in society at large. That basically means that we're also interested in papers that are about, for instance, standards battles or battles for dominant designs or platform wars. Now, the area of standardization is quite multidisciplinary. So comparable to what Professor Fleck also said, we emphasize various perspectives, basically from engineering on the one hand, so very technical papers, but also from, for instance, the social sciences, economics, management, public policy, and also from the humanities, so ethics, for instance. A little bit about the topics. Well, I just put this slide on, and I just made a selection, I think, of the topics that are may also be covered at this conference. So you can read them on this slide. The attached conferences. We have 3 conferences to which this journal is attached, and that is the Standardization and Innovation in Information Technology Conference, is basically the International Conference on Standardization, and then we have the European equivalent, and we have the ITU Kaleidoscope Conference. A little bit about the review process. Typically takes 12 to 16 weeks. We have 4 types of manuscripts. Articles, full-blown articles, 8,000 words, book reviews, research notes. Those are basically small commentaries and consist of 3,000, 4,000 words. And also we have invited papers. Basically a little bit about the process then. Well, there's of course initial assessment. Takes about 1 week maximum. Then we have the review process. We'll invite 3 to 5 editorial review board members. I think they are also very valuable. Therefore, I put them also on the slide. Then there's the associate editor evaluation, of course, and then there's a decision can be accept with minor revisions, major revisions, and reject. So a revision is no guarantee for acceptance, of course. I also put a little bit on the valuation criteria. I think that most of the other editors have already said a lot about tips. So I just put this on the slide. Maybe this might help you. Some things might be more logical, others might not be that logical. So there's also more info on this website of IGI Global on publishing in general, and there's a lot of tips there. So that's the
first link. Then there's another journal, and that's the Journal of Energies. It's an open access journal by MDPI, and that is in that journal we actually have a special issue on technology and strategy for sustainable energy systems. And basically, in that journal, normally a lot of more technical papers are published, but the editor also wanted to have not an engineering perspective of on energy systems, but more a social science perspective. So, and that's basically what we also call for in this special issue. I do that together with Breno Nunes, Paulo Savilla, and Leon. Deadline is in the future, 20th of April. So there's still some time left for writing. Here are a couple of the topics. Well, you can read them on the slide, so I will not spend much time on them. But very important, good papers that are submitted to this conference and that could fit in this special issue will also be invited to submit an updated version of the paper to this special issue. Well, Breno, I try to do this as quick as possible, so we have some time left at the end for discussion. I think that's very important.
Thanks, Gerten. That was perfect. You still had 32 seconds left on your lot. So thank you for keeping up with the time. Yeah, very. I understand that now we have. I'm sorry, I messed up with the order, right? So it should have been Harmjan, but they are both fellow country mates from the Netherlands, although Harmjan is in Hawaii now. And I apologize for jumping out you on the queue, Harmjan, but over to you now. Harmjan is in the Hawaii Pacific University and is representing Journal of Manufacturing Technology Management at the International Journal of Information and Operations Management Education.
Okay. Thank you, Breno. Yeah, I was afraid there for a moment that I woke up early for nothing. Okay.
Can you just tell everybody what time is it now there? Because we truly appreciate your efforts in.
Yeah, it's about 2:15 in the morning.
Oh gosh, we really appreciate your participation, Harmjan. Go ahead.
So if I fall asleep, there's a reason for it. Aside from maybe having a boring presentation. Well, we'll see. So yes, I'm presenting two journals. I'm editor-in-chief of two journals. And I'll present a little bit of some data and what we are about for both of those. The first one, Journal of Manufacturing Technology Management. Basically, the scope for this journal is management of manufacturing technology. So it has a very strong focus on manufacturing. We do accept papers that have different angles like supply chain, service, or whatnot, but we are looking for a specific contribution in terms of manufacturing. So if it's a supply chain paper that is about warehousing or something, then it doesn't work. But if it has manufacturing slant to it, it's okay. So one of the things I sometimes look at is, does the term manufacturing even appear in your paper? And if it doesn't, then we usually reject those papers. One of the things we do not publish is operations research, simulation-oriented papers, modeling, demotel, etc., all those kind of things. And the reason is we just made a specific choice for a focus. There's a lot of other journals that will do those kind of things, management science or operations research-oriented journals. So we don't publish those. Average time for the first decision is roughly speaking 2 weeks, but as some other people said, that is influenced by desk rejects, which are usually within a couple of days. And the average time from submit to acceptance is about 6 months. Again, there's a little bit of variation, depends upon how many revisions you have. Our impact factor is currently, I think, 3.2, something like that. This shows that it's been going up in recent years. The first impact factor we got was in 2018. So we have some growth. And then with that also, our submissions have gone up quite a lot. And connected with that, the rejection rate has also gone up. So we have quite a high rejection rate. It's probably this year it's going to be a little bit over 90%. So to just give you a little bit of insight, this is by each stage. About 80% of papers get rejected in the desk reject stage. If you have a first round review, then out of those, about 35% get rejected. It varies a little bit. I think this year it's a little bit closer to 50% actually, but it's somewhere in that range. And then what this slide shows is after that, so after you've had a first round review and you have a revision, then the chances of getting accepted actually improve, because after that we don't have that many rejections anymore. The third round review goes up a little bit because we usually don't do a fourth round review. We have it sometimes, but usually if you can't figure stuff out by the third round, then we just reject it at that stage. Also, some major reasons why papers get desk rejected. So about 55% of the papers that get desk rejected because they're out of scope. And that out of scope typically means they're not manufacturing. So they're not manufacturing related, they're modeling or simulation oriented. Or what we also get is frequently, and especially from India, is papers that are on technological process. So they'll talk about you know, some kind of forming or metal, working on metal or something like that, and it's very technical. So that's a major reason for desk reject. About 20% is because there's no clear contribution. I'll say something about that here in a moment, because that's kind of the key thing that we're looking for. About 20% is in general just poor quality, could be a whole bunch of things. And then about 5% is other. In particular, language is a key issue there. We try to be a little bit, you know, lenient in the sense that if your language isn't great, but you seem to have a good contribution, we may give you a shot. But a lot of times, especially if your abstract or title isn't good, it will create problems, because it's very hard to get reviewers if you have language issues in the abstract or the title, because that's what gets sent in the invitation. So especially those are very important. After review, if your paper gets rejected, 55% of that is because reviewers think that the paper is poor quality, and that usually is several issues. So it usually means the literature review isn't up to date, methodology has issues, etc. About 30% is because there's no clear theoretical contribution. And then about 10% is where they say there's flaws in the methodology, you can't fix that. And that relates more to several rounds of review if there's not enough improvement. And so my predecessors have already announced, you know, reviewers are a scarce resource. You have to deal with that in a polite manner. And I'll say something about that in a little bit again. But essentially, one of the things is you have to have improvements. If you don't make enough improvement, at some point, the reviewers will just get upset, you know, and will reject the paper. The typical article setup is that we get is something like an introduction, a literature review, a methodology, data, discussion of the data, and then some conclusions. That is not sufficient for us. What we're looking for is that the literature review is in depth and looking at where the problems are in the theory. And that goes back to that contribution part. So a lot of times the literature review is just kind of like a summation. Smith said this and Johns did this, and, you know, without a real analysis of what is happening and where the theory is lacking. And that goes in the later part too. Discussion of the data is most of the time in isolation. So you have a study, you have your data, and then a discussion of that data, for example, hypothesis testing, and then that's usually where it ends. And that would probably get you rejected in JMTM. What we're looking for is that you then connect back to the literature, because that literature review should have identified where problems are in the theory, and then you have to connect back to that and say, okay, well, now that we have our study, this is how this study specifically makes a contribution to that theory. And JMTM is still looking at practical implications as well. So basically, there should be some new insight into theory, and it should then lead to basically advice on how management of manufacturing should be different. So that's contribution, major aspect of getting accepted into JMTM. So roughly speaking, if you look at 100% of the papers that we publish, where do they get accepted? Nothing gets accepted in the first round. About 30% gets accepted after the first revision, about a little over 40% after the second round of revision, and then another 20 to 30% after the third round of revision, and something like a little bit less than 5% after the fourth round of revision. So that roughly tells you when most papers will need 2 revision rounds to get accepted. My other journal is Information and Operations Management Education. And the scope of that is basically education oriented on technical subjects such as information management, operations management, technology management, engineering management, any of those kind of areas. And the goal is basically to publish research that contributes to improving teaching of those areas. It's very broad. This is a much smaller journal. It doesn't have impact factor because it's too small for those kind of things. Basically, we're looking at a very broad orientation related to education, validation of methods, teaching methods used in a new context. For example, somebody may have done a study on, let's say, online education in psychology, and now somebody does that in operations management. If you do a study like that, that's great. And then you can relate that back to, if it's the same or different results. We will publish literature reviews. The field of education, university education, and the teaching and pedagogy of that doesn't really have that many publications. So this is, it's kind of a shame because it's actually an area where you can easily get data, because anybody who teaches has students in the classroom and you can collect data. We're looking at new methods. So for example, with COVID, we have more online education. There's more, new things like flipped classroom. Any of those kind of things would be welcome in this journal. Average time from submission to acceptance is about 4 months, but it fluctuates quite a bit depending on what you do. Basically, the rejection reasons for this is that it's not properly designed. And the problem is that when people do something on education, they kind of forget that they have to kind of follow scientific principles and have a methodology and have some kind of like logic behind the whole thing. So for example, we will get a paper that has an idea about the flipped classroom. And so an instructor will then write an article on this and just write about, well, a little bit of insight into flipped classroom. Then they'll talk about how they implemented it, and then they'll draw conclusions about how that went. And that's not really a good design. You wouldn't do that for any other study either, because what you're lacking here is any kind of really study in what it is that you're measuring. For example, if you just implement and then say something about the effectiveness, in order to be able to do that, you would have to have data from before you change your classroom. The only other thing that you can measure is maybe student satisfaction, but that really doesn't do a whole lot. So in this case, you would have no literature review, not a carefully designed methodology, and you're not really able to draw conclusions about improvement. So you just have to keep methodology in mind or scientific principles, and then most of the time, those articles will be acceptable. So the ideal methodology is...
Just 1 minute, okay? Just for to wrap it up,
yeah, I'm almost done. Yeah, okay. So basically what we're looking for is that you do a literature review on the topic, that you have some kind of data from before you did your intervention or your change in the classroom, then describe the change, then have post-intervention data, and then you can compare the results and have new insights for theory and practice. So some general bits of advice, basically read author guidelines that journals have. It's amazing how many people don't read those. For example, article length is in there. I would look at the list of references. Again, as an example, JMTM, if your list of references doesn't have anything about manufacturing, that means you don't have a good fit. I would also recommend reading several issues of a journal so that you kind of get a sense on what actually gets published. And you can, when you do that, you can also look for patterns. What's the typical length of papers? What's the number of references? How are articles typically set up, etc. I also would say get to know the journal and the editor. You could volunteer as a reviewer. That will give you some insight into how it works. And an editor also, for example, JMTM, well, actually both of my journals, I would appreciate it if you have a letter to the editor accompanying your submission. And I want to see what it is that you're doing, and you should be able to explain to me in that letter what your contribution is. If you're not able to do that, I already have question marks. But a lot of people don't do that. But for me, that's an important part. I read those. So getting an initial revision decision is actually good news. Some people get disappointed because they didn't get an acceptance, but there's no acceptance in the first round. And for a revision, make sure that you respond to all comments. Now is it. Did I still make it in time, Brandon?
Oh, we went two minutes over, but that's good enough when you present two journals.
Oh, well, thank you.
Considering the time zone, all the jet lag, you've done very well. So we're over now to Dave Bailey. Last but not least, Professor Dave Bailey from University of Birmingham. Present editor-in-chief of Journal of Regional Studies. Over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Bruno. I hope you can hear me okay. And a big thank you to Bruno, because he invited me to IAMOT last year, which was very enjoyable. I would have come this year, of course, if it had taken place. But he's kind of thought about how he connects with different journals. So a big thank you for getting regional studies involved. Regional studies, it covers development of theories, concepts, empirical analysis and policy debate in the field of regional studies. And the key thing here is if you're doing work on innovation or technology management, innovation policy that has a sub-national element, that has some sort of regional dimension, we would consider it. And in fact, we have lots of papers on innovation and on knowledge management in the journal. We've got a decent impact factor, especially for a kind of interdisciplinary journal. It's well regarded in the Association of Business School rankings and around the world. Lots and lots of downloads. So, hundreds of thousands of downloads just in the last 6 months. Many of our editors have an innovation or a technology management dimension to their work. So we're open to papers, and it's good to be involved with IAMOT. A number of different sections to the journal. So there are main papers, there's a policy debate section, urban and regional horizons, which is not only kind of review, but a forward-looking where things might go, book reviews, and also special issues, which I'll come back to in a moment. So basically, in the journal, there's a lot on innovation and technology at a regional level. Most papers will go into the main section. These tend to be between 8,000 and 10,000 words. They cover economics, business, social, geographical, political, and environmental dimensions of urban and regional subnational change. I should say, sort of, recognizing what came before, that we're owned by the Regional Studies Association. We desk reject about 45% of papers, so less than some other journals, partly because we're owned by an association. We feel it's important to actually give early stage researchers some sort of feedback. Even those papers that we desk reject, you're going to get 2 or 3 editors looking at them. Our turnaround times are quick. So on average, about 45 days. And as we heard before, that's quite 2 different populations. So for desk rejects, on average, that's going to be within 2 weeks. For papers that go into review, on average, within 2 months. Another key point in terms of the main section is we're looking for papers that make a substantive contribution to scholarly debates, are subnational in focus, they're conceptually well informed, empirically grounded, and methodologically sound. And we also want these submissions to engage with wider debates in regional studies. What we're really looking for are, as we were hearing from some of the other editors, are papers that are contributing to a conversation. What are the areas in the field that need to be explored? How does your paper contribute to that? So, if you're going to pitch to the journal, have a look at the debates in the journal and in related journals and try and show how you are contributing to that debate. What's your part of the conversation? We've also got a section on policy debates. That's also fully refereed, and it's looking more at the policy end of it. So it's trying to look at really the interface between academic and practitioner communities. So it's sort of implications for policy, both successful and unsuccessful, but trying to pull out the wider significance for policy. The editor there for that is Lisa DePropris, my colleague at Birmingham. The Urban and Regional Horizon section is a kind of more about a kind of not just a review of what's happening, but what are the big challenges or debates that are coming up. So, for example, we've had some very nice ones around, for example, Industry 4.0, what it might mean for innovation and for regions. That's edited by John Harrison at Loughborough. And we have lots and lots of special issues. So, for example, 2 of the current special issue calls that are open, one that I'm guest editing with Christos Pitelis and Phil Tomlinson is really around industrial policy, industrial strategy. Another one by Lisa and Marco Bellandi in Italy is about Industry 4.0, how that disrupts regions. Lots of recent special issues have touched on innovation, knowledge management, for example. I've just put up the details of that Industry 4.0 call just in case it's of interest to anyone. A few very quick points before I finish. We're really looking for papers that contribute to the conversations that take place in our journal and related journals. So if you're coming out of the conference and you're an early career researcher, think about what journal you're aiming at. You know, most people, most academics, and I'm still guilty of this sometimes, is write a paper and then think, where can I pitch it? Think about the journal you're aiming at first, because then you can link it into the debates that the editors are interested in. And another quick point is what makes a high impact journal? If you're simply describing something, you'll tend to get into a national level journal, it'll be relatively low impact. If you're simply applying theory, you may get into an international basic journal, relatively low impact. If you're extending or reworking theory, you may get into an international journal, you're getting good impact. But if you start to really question the underlying assumptions behind the theory, adding to the kind of evolution of the theory over time, and really kind of critiquing the direction of theoretical development, then you're going to get high impact in your journal. That's taken from a kind of presentation by Rob Kitchen from Ireland. What we are looking for is originality, we're looking for significance, and we're looking for rigor, whether that's qualitative or quantitative. And I should stress that we are methodologically open and we are heterodox. So we take a variety of different perspectives in the work. Key point is, if what you're doing has a regional dimension to it, in terms of work on innovation or technology, please do consider regional studies. We'd be very interested. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Much appreciated for you sticking up with your time as well. Really, I think very important tips there. You know, of course, I have the hard job of timekeeping in an interesting session like that, but because the editors have done such a wonderful job here, some of the topics that we put for discussion, they were pretty much already addressed by James, Bahamian, Steve, Scott, Gert, and Dave Bailey. So I think after these initial presentations, we can kind of say that the editors have stated quite clearly what are the requirements to develop the papers further, and to make sure that it is within the scope of the journal, make sure that, you know, language issues are solved before you're submitting, read through the journal and know the areas properly. But I think I would kick off the discussion here with the emerging topics that perhaps are coming up in the future issues. And I'll open the floor, so any of you who wants to bring up any areas that you think are interestful for your journal, and then I'm with one eye here on the Q&A area as well, in case we get questions from the audience. Any volunteers? Yeah, David, over to you.
Bruno, thank you. I should have probably touched on this at the end, but I mean, if you look at the very last issue of Regional Studies, I think there are sort of 3 or 4 papers with an innovation or technology management element. The editorial is on regions in a time of pandemic. So the impact of coronavirus on how we interact, how companies interact, will we still see agglomerations within cities, or will the suburbs emerge? How that impacts on regions and cities, and also on how innovation is done, I think will be very interesting. Sustainability transitions will be huge. Industry 4.0, how that will impact, and increasingly the role of the state in terms of going through and coming out of the coronavirus? Will we have to rethink the role of the state in things like industrial policy, regional policy? Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Dave, for that. I can see James and then Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. I think a topic I've noticed coming through, and I think it's worth people thinking about, it's been underpinned by our experience right now with Zoom, and that's the whole issue of the digitization of the economy, and in particular, the role of platform technologies. Leave that as a suggestion.
Thank you very much. Steve Walsh. Make sure that you need to unmute yourself, please.
Most people want me to mute myself. So I just want to say that what's happening in I 4.0 and the low, I just put out a paper on low touch economy. Hopefully it'll get accepted. We had some real data and we really did some work on it. We think it's interesting. There's a number of journals here that are interested in it. Regional development, I think there's going to be this joint special issue between TFSC and JSBM where they're looking at technological entrepreneurship and small business technology development, which is really economic development, as I would go back to David. A lot of my papers go on that kind of issue. The field with I 4.0 and what's going on is going crazy. Interestingly enough, the United States doesn't talk about I 4.0 as much as Europe does. And I think that's a paper for the US-based journals that really needs to focus on. Additive manufacturing is a very big topic right now. Any of the harbingers of the Schumpeterian wave, the fifth industrial revolution, which we call I 4.0 for some reason, are very important to all the journals that I represent.
Excellent. Thanks to Steve as well. Harm-Jan, I can see your hands up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think similar. So for JMTM, some of the important topics are Industry 4.0. Our next issue will be a special issue on that. And then probably later this year, we'll have another special issue. So those kind of things. And I think in manufacturing, there's quite some interesting work in relationship to technology. For example, drones being used inside factories. Also, we have a paper that's going to be coming out soon. It's exoskeletal stuff. So that's technology with human bodies. So those kind of developments in new technology and manufacturing are interesting. For my other journal, in particular, actually, the COVID can have quite some impact on how we teach. I think most of us are impacted by that, moving to online teaching and stuff like that. So any kind of papers on that are interesting. And by the way, on JMTM, for example, we already have received some papers related to COVID, but most of them get rejected because they don't do anything in terms of contributing to theory. What they do is just describe something, usually from a distance, because people don't have the data yet from companies on how it affected manufacturing or whatnot. So it doesn't really do anything. You have to still say something about how does it change, any kind of theoretical insights that we already have.
Thanks, Harm-Jan. I think Gerten, are you put your hands up there?
Yeah, I represent a very specific journal, but for the International Journal of Standardization, we're also very much interested in the platformification in how business models will change with the advent of Internet of Things, but also in more specifically returning more towards dominant designs, towards platforms, and not only formal standards. What we're also interested in is the link between standardization and innovation, and that's why I'm also here at this conference. So any research that looks at how standardization can impact innovation would also be very much welcome.
Thanks, Gerten. Yeah, so we can see that many areas, of course, COVID-19 pandemic appears in the agenda. but other areas, you know, of technology and innovation also kind of hot in the eyes of our editors here. If you know, Tarek, did you put your hands up? Did you want to ask a question? You need to unmute yourself, Tarek, please. So we get our first question from the audience here.
First of all, I want to
Tarek
thank all the panelists for a wonderful session. It's a great session. Appreciate your presence and your thoughts. My question was very similar to yours, actually, and it's essentially what would they like to see, or what would they expect in the future research to be, particularly if they're talking about significant topic that they are looking for. I mean, what would be the most pressing, significant topic that they would think of?
Any further comments? Perhaps Scott, who hasn't commented yet.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Scott and Jim. James,
I am very interested in broader instruments of the innovation process. And we've heard about patents and we've heard about papers, and I'm not saying they're not important, but I'm just really surprised that we're not seeing more contributions on the area of social media and altmetrics, not just on how they affect innovation, but how they affect on society as a whole. During the Arab Spring, there was a little bit of a burst there, and then they've kind of died away again. But I'm quite convinced that's a topic that we all need to hear more about.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I think it's quite interesting as well that there's a lot of debate about fake news and social media, and apparently these has not been is not kind of explicitly in the agenda. But I will turn the open now, hand it over to Jamie Fleck.
Right. No, yes, that's what I was really getting at with the digitization of the economy and of society, really. There's so many things happening there, and that's an interesting topic. But there's another point that, in answer to the question, I'm getting a little bit frustrated. I've heard from my colleagues about data and the importance of data, and I'm not denying that that's not important. But actually, I think right now we require some heavy-duty thinking about the basic concepts, the basic theory. I mentioned in my presentation about some of the classics of the field, going back 50 years or so, when it was very new, people came in with big ideas, and then researchers looked at that. One of my pet...
Sorry, James, you're muted. I think you...
One of the issues that frustrate me somewhat is when people write a paper that has got a nice data set and they self-limit by really following the conventions. I think that the time for more fundamental thinking, or the opportunity for more fundamental thinking, broader thinking, is certainly right here. We could do with some brave theoretical analysis, conceptual analysis, rather than simply following the data and, if you like, sorry, I've lost there's a point I wanted to make, and I've lost the thread there. Sorry about that. I'll come back.
Yeah, but I follow you up there, James. It's quite interesting that, I'm kind of 10 years of research now since my PhD, and you can see that all the papers were kind of more eager, perhaps, to challenge conventional thinking through opinion pieces, even rebuttal papers. And today it seems to be to gravitate more towards these methodological rigor and other issues. And then it's kind of almost a trade-off between being a radical thinker and using methodology as a servant to see methodology as the key point. But I think Harmian wants also to point out, so over to you, Harmian.
Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit on the journal, but I will go to a large degree along with James, that it's not just about the methodology or just about the data. In fact, we would be looking for papers that have more of theoretical insight, but that really comes from deep thinking, right? And that's actually one thing that I miss in a lot of our submissions. So the submission is there, the methodology is there, the data is there, and then when you look at the conclusions, it's very weak. It's like, come on, you got it. That's why we are looking for that connection back to the literature. What does it do, and how does this make any distinction? But without any kind of data or any kind of theoretical reasoning, that's very hard to do. So if people just write an opinion piece, we won't publish it. But if you do strong conceptual thinking and you delve into the existing theories and the underlying assumptions, and you have your arguments, that would be fine. In fact, that would be welcome. It doesn't happen a lot, but that would be very interesting. See, for example, I think. So we get a lot of papers on, let's say, lean. Actually, we get a lot of paper from India, and they're always about lean in a particular state in India or whatnot, or a particular industry. It's like, we don't care, because you don't really do anything other than showing something for, from an Indian perspective or whatnot. And it doesn't really contribute anything else. But I think one of the really underlying assumptions in lean is that you have a stable environment. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been messed up so much with this COVID virus, because everything became unstable, and all of a sudden we had no inventory for a lot of items, and it's very hard to produce because you require flexibility. So those kind of papers that will get into that kind of stuff would be really interesting. See, I've been talking about a special issue. I'm pretty sure most of you probably have been talking about a special issue, COVID related. We haven't done anything, but because we got stuck on the issue, like, what is it? We don't just want to present papers on COVID. That doesn't, but if it leads to new insights about things that have gone wrong, or new theoretical insights, like maybe new approaches to manufacturing to be able to handle a pandemic in the future, something like that. But you'd have to point out the flaws of existing systems, and then you can have the theoretical arguments.
Many thanks, Harmian. I think really interesting points here. We're hearing, I'm conscious of time, so I apologize to be the bearer of the bad news that we're coming to a close now. But as the Vice President of for Education, Research and Publications of IAMOT, I would like again to thank Professor Scott Cunningham, Professor Steve Walsh, Professor Harmian Christine Hughes, Dr. Gerten van der Kar, Professor James Flack, and Professor Dave Bailey for their wonderful participation in the panel, for sharing their views about how to get your fine work published, and to interact with their journals, the priorities of their journals, the hot areas, and to reaffirm here the commitment of IAMOT for an inclusive research perspective, and using IAMOT in the future conferences of IAMOT as fast-track mechanisms for journals to publish. One of them, as Steve mentioned, is a partnership that we are creating with International Journal of Technology, Intelligence and Planning, of the editor of Nazrul Islam of University of Exeter. And it was approved by the board of directors of IAMOT that we will have a joint effort to produce a special issue for next year. But thanks again, thanks and congratulations to Nile University for organizing such a wonderful yet online conference. We all wish we could be seeing the pyramids behind us now, but it's a pleasure to see you all on my screen. Thank you very much.
All wonderful. There are certificates that we will distribute for thanking the presenters and the people with us on the panel. And I think Nazar always likes to take a group picture.
Oh.
So Professor Breno, thank you very much for chairing the panel in here.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. And then next, Professor Scott Cunningham. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Professor Harmian Steenhuis. Appreciate your presence always and waking up that early. Professor Stephen Walsh, always pleasure to see you, Steve. Thank you. Professor Turgal Daim. We wish him safety and health, and hopefully the fires will go away and we'll see him next time. Professor Geerten van der Ka, thank you, Geerten. It's wonderful to see you again. And Professor James Fleck, we appreciate your thoughtful insights into all these issues in here that we are discussing. I think we are coming to an end, so one group picture.
Professor Dave Bailey as well.
Who's there? Oh, David
yeah.
Bailey, thank you. Sorry, yeah, I don't know why that didn't come up. Thank you, David. It's wonderful to see you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tariq. Thank you, Breno and Or, our distinguished panelists. Right now, I ask you just to have a nice smile to get the group picture. David Bennett, are you there? Please, if you can open your camera, this will be great. Okay. David?
Maybe it is.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Smile. I'll take more than one shot. Okay.
Oh, there we go, David. You're looking good.
Okay, get ready. Okay. Wow. Where are you, David?
He turned it off. David?
Okay. Just David.
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
Let's take the first shot. Okay. Second one.
Thank you, Nazar.
One more.
One more. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
all.
Nizar. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, the panelists and all attendees.
Thanks,
Have a
Breno.
good day, you all.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Verno. Thank you,
David
Tarek.
is here. Oh, just a second. Just a second. Oh, David arrived. Wow.
That is back.
Back. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Smile. One,
Okay.
two,
There's Mike.
3. Okay. Just let's see. Let's turn this look like. Perfect. Okay. Thank you
good.
very much
Thank
for
you.
the wonderful session. It was really quite
Thank you,
interesting.
Breno.
See you and have a nice time. Okay.
Okay, same
Thank
to
you.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to join us in the upcoming session about it will be addressed by Jeff Betts from the CTO Group CTO IBM. It's coming in after 10 minutes, so we can switch to the other room to join with Jeff. Thank you very much and see you later. Bye.
Bye.